All right, welcome to the Explainer. So if you're gearing up for the SAFE exam, you already know questions about regulatory authority are going to be on there. It's a guarantee. Well, today we're going to nail this topic down for you. We'll break down exactly who's making the rules, who's enforcing them, and pretty much everything you need to know to crush that test and get your career started.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. As a future MLO, who is actually watching over your shoulder? I mean, what power do they really have? And look, this isn't just about passing the exam. This is literally the blueprint for how you'll operate in your career. We're going to break down the two main players you need to understand: the state agencies and, of course, the big one at the federal level, the CFPB.
So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at why we even have these regulations. Then we'll get into the SAFE Act framework itself. After that, we'll cover the state regulator's authority and then the CFPB's federal oversight. And finally, we'll talk about the stuff you really need to know for the exam, violations and penalties.
All right, first up, why regulation exists. From chaos to control. So why all these rules anyway? Well, to really get it, we have to rewind the clock a bit, back to the financial chaos before 2008. That whole situation basically forced a complete overhaul of how the mortgage industry was policed. Before 2008, it was kind of like the Wild West. Seriously, mortgage regulation was all over the place. It was completely inconsistent from state to state. Imagine playing a game where the rules are different in every single city. That's what it was like. You had some states with really strict rules and others, well, not so much. And all that inconsistency, it created massive loopholes, which, as we all know, played a huge role in the 2008 financial crisis.
Okay, so because of that crisis, Congress had to step in. And what came out of it was a landmark piece of legislation that completely reshaped the entire mortgage landscape. It created the system that you, as a future MLO, are about to become a part of.
And that brings us to the big one, the Secure and Fair Enforcement for Mortgage Licensing Act, or as we all know it, the SAFA Act of 2008. Now listen up, because this is a huge takeaway for your exam. The SAFA Act didn't get rid of state laws. Not at all. What it did was create a national minimum standard. Think of it like a federal floor. It's the baseline that every single state has to meet to protect consumers and cut down on fraud. This timeline is really important to understand. It shows you how all the pieces came together. So in 2008, we get the SAFE Act inside of HERA. Then, a couple years later, in 2010, the Dodd-Frank Act comes along and creates this brand new, really powerful agency, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB. And then by 2011, the authority to actually implement the SAFE Act gets handed over from HUD to this new CFPB. It's a logical progression. So you might be asking, how on earth do you manage a national standard across 50 different states? Great question. And the answer is the NMLS, the Nationwide Mortgage Licensing System and Registry. For the exam, just think of it as the central hub, the master database for every single MLO. It's the official system of record that keeps track of your license, your education, and, this is super important, your entire compliance history for anyone to see. Okay, so we've got the national rulebook down. Now let's talk about the local referee. Because even though the SAFA Act is a federal law, the real day-to-day, hands-on authority, well, that belongs to the individual state regulators. And this is a really key point. Your primary regulator, the agency you're going to deal with most of the time, is at the state level. They're the ones who will literally license you, supervise your work, and if something goes wrong, they're the ones who will discipline you. And just look at the scope of their power. We're talking about the authority to write their own rules and regulations, conduct deep background checks on you, criminal, credit, you name it. They set the fees, they approve or deny your license. They can even issue a cease and desist order to shut you down or order you to pay back consumers. This is serious stuff.
And it doesn't stop there. Their investigative powers are massive. They can examine any of your books and records, they can subpoena witnesses and documents, they can put you under oath and take testimony. They can literally control access to your own records during an investigation. And this is a big one, they report every violation, every action straight to the NMLS. That creates a public permanent record that follows you wherever you go. So if the states are the local referees on the field, who's in charge of the entire league? Who's the commissioner? Well, that's where the federal government steps in, specifically the CFPB, the federal overseer. Now, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, they aren't worried about your individual license application. Nope, their job is way bigger.
You could say they regulate the regulators. Their whole purpose is to make sure the states are actually meeting those minimum standards set by the SAFA Act. They're the ones making sure that federal floor is solid everywhere. And this chart really spells out that division of labor perfectly. On one hand, you have the state authority. They're the ones directly licensing and supervising you, conducting the exams, and enforcing state-specific laws. Then you have the CFPB authority. They're monitoring the states to make sure they're complying with the SAFE Act, and they're writing the big federal rules like Regulation H. And get this? If a state totally drops the ball, the CFPB has the power to step in and set up its own federal licensing system for that state. That's their ultimate trump card. Okay, we know the rules, we know the referees. Now, for the part the SAFE exam absolutely loves to test you on. What happens when you break the rules? Let's talk about the consequences of non-compliance. So what can a state agency do to you? Well, they have a whole toolbox of enforcement actions. They can deny, suspend, or completely revoke your license. They can decline to renew it. They can order you to pay restitution back to consumers. They can hit you with fines, issue cease and desist orders. They can even have you removed from your job. These aren't just slaps on the wrist. All right, I want you to burn this number into your brain for the exam. $25,000. That is the maximum civil penalty a state can impose for each, and I mean each, act or omission that violates the SAFE Act. That's not per investigation, that is per single violation. It adds up incredibly fast. So what kind of stuff are we talking about here? Well, these are the big ones, the common prohibited acts, things like employing any kind of scheme to defraud or mislead a borrower, or engaging in unfair or deceptive practices. Conducting business without a license, that's a huge no-no. Failing to give people the disclosures they're legally entitled to, or making false or deceptive statements about loan terms. Basically, these are the exact things the SAFE Act was designed to stamp out. So now you know the rules and you know the referees. Are you ready to play the game? Look, understanding this whole framework, the state authority, the federal oversight, the penalties, it isn't just about passing your exam. It's the absolute foundation for a compliant, successful, and long-lasting career as a mortgage loan originator. You got this.